Alright. Hello everyone, welcome to a new video here. I wanted to go over a new graphic I just put out. It was an update to one I did about a month or 2 months ago. Going over basically just kind of analyzing the value of all the bleed units and trying to give those light spenders, min-maxers, a general idea of kind of how valuable each unit is and, whether some units are worth maybe skipping. Of course, this is just a way to play the game, and this is just my opinion on a way to play the game. So, do what you will find the most fun, but I just like to provide a guide for the people who really care about, kind of getting as much value as possible on the units they're summoning on. So just to kind of go over this first page here, for anyone returning from the last video or from the last graphic, I made a few changes here. I switched this third tier to kind of moderate value because I felt like that wasn't really super accurate. I believe it was situational value. It was situational value before. I just didn't like the word situational because it kind of felt more like a 50-50, whereas this kind of feels more like a 75%, value unit, where it's like, I don't know. I situational kind of felt like it was like, oh, all or nothing. Whereas moderate, it's like, yeah, okay, these guys are like it closes the gap, I think, between these two tiers and this tier. Whereas when it was situational, it kind of felt like it was these two, and then the rest were kind of their own bubbles. But so I'm hoping moderate value kind of just makes it flow a little better from top to bottom. And then I changed a few. I changed the wording around a little bit. Nothing crazy. It's still the same general idea. Obviously, luxury build. The purpose behind these is just like these characters have a niche and they have a use case, but it's like, you really shouldn't be. They shouldn't be your priority, and they shouldn't be being invested in too much on their first go arounds. Usually, I think they're kind of only worth picking up on reruns unless they're in the middle of like a dry spell and you have a bunch of anvils, whatever. For the most part, I think they're kind of like skips, but there's like a reason to pull on them. There's enough of a reason to pull on them where I don't feel like putting them in skip tier. I got rid of the T-Sphere icon because I thought that was a little confusing. And I also just added legacy piece recommendations to every character. So I added this note here, kind of just saying, on average, roughly, T-Sphere is better until unique LP is 5 blue. Now, if your T-Sphere is like 5 blue or less, a 0 to 5 white LP will just be better. But for anyone in like the purple 5 plus area of T-Sphere, your T-Sphere is going to be better until you get the LP to 5 blue. And then I changed the star icon. Now the star icon is showing if there's a new addition instead of, I think it showed if a unit required their legacy piece, but again, like I mentioned with the T-Sphere thing, I shifted to just straight up adding a legacy piece recommendation on these characters. So I just felt that I would use this for anyone who was new instead of just if they needed their piece. All right, so let's just get right into it. We're gonna start with the highest value here. There weren't a ton of changes. A lot of these have kind of stayed the same. Just to point out, because I forgot to put a key up here, that was my bad. The star number on the right here, this is their quote-unquote breakpoint star, because a lot of people have kind of asked for that, and I figured it was easiest to just put that all in one graphic. So this is the most important star in their kit. Like, if you're summoning on Riddler, you can leave him at 1 star of whatever color you're going to take him to. But like if you're pulling on like Sin, I really think you should take the 2-star because that first skill is extra valuable. None of them I think are too crazy. For the most part, the majority of them are going to be 1-star. If they're not 1-star, I'll make a brief note as to why they're not 1-star. But for the most part, it's just because the ult is so strong. Or in a lot of cases, it's like the 5th star skill is really strong, so you might as well just get the extra ult if you're only 1 copy away. So yeah, that's kind of the logic behind that. And then this is going to show you your best in slot legacy pieces. If it only has one legacy piece, it really means there's not any reason to run anything else on them. In some cases, obviously, you're not going to have Riddler Kane right when you get Riddler, in which case I would just, I have my spreadsheet. There's other resources you can find. And you also just kind of get used to like, oh, okay, like Star Staff is going to be a good for kind of just any support, any buffer. And then, like, IV Dart is kind of for those AoE physical or the spiritual DPS if you don't have their unique legacy piece. And then T-Sphere, obviously, is just going to be on basically every physical DPS. I don't want to say every because I don't remember 100%, but I'm pretty sure basically every physical DPS is going to have T-Sphere here for the reason I obviously mentioned down here. So, yeah. if you watched last month, not a lot has changed. I did finally bite the bullet, and I swapped Khan and Joker. I think a lot of that was just because Joker has more hyper carry potential with Riddler and with Freeze. And I think Khan is ironically the weakest out of the trio. And I think there's a universe where we get Mythic plus Fate, and the JLD core just benches Khan completely, and you just run Swamp Thing, Fate, Zatanna, and just throw them on a bunch of teams. But we'll see. We'll kind of keep an eye on that. So I did end up moving Khan down. I don't think he has the hyper carry potential as the rest of these DPS in this category. So that was the reason behind that. There wasn't a ton of changes here. I moved Nightwing over Sinestro. I didn't really want to add a marker to that because it wasn't enough of a change that I felt like pointing it out. But I do think Nightwing at the moment is currently just better than Sinestro. I think Sinestro kind of has been struggling ever since all the spiritual damage counters, and he's largely disappeared, I feel like, from the highest tier global meta brawl, which is definitely a bit of a shock to a lot of people. So yeah, I think Nightwing is just a little teeny bit more universal and can kind of do a lot. You can build a lot of, you can get him, and then it's not going to be like, oh, you have to build XYZ because you got Nightwing. You can kind of just build whatever you want around Nightwing, and Nightwing is just good enough to just be thrown wherever he wants to go. So yeah, I think a lot of the logic behind these characters hasn't changed. Swamp Thing has a couple stars mentioned. The 2-star is good because you get extra energy gain when you level up the star, and the 5-star is obviously good because that's his damage reduction skill, which is a very big part of his kit. So that's kind of the logic behind those two. The ult is like fine, but it's only going to increase the damage of the ultimate, which is like whatever. You don't really care about the damage of the ultimate because he's not meant to do damage. He's just bringing utility to the team. Yeah, a lot of these guys haven't changed. Just pointing out that, like, I think a lot of these characters, Zatanna, obviously, if you have been following the game closely, her legacy piece is like notoriously horrible. I debated recommending Superboy guitar here, so I think you could honestly, you can run either or, but Starheart Staff is, I think, just slightly easier for most people, because at least, you don't have to spend eyes. So that's worth a shout. There are some cases where you want to run Gabriel Horn on Swamp Thing over the Antler Crown, because maybe you don't need the crit damage debuff. The attack and crit damage debuff is basically entirely for Deathstroke and for Laud, but you might not need that against certain spiritual comps, so the energy gain on Horn might be a little better. Starfire basically needs Starbolts to function. There's no doubt about that. Hippo, same thing here. There are a few very niche cases where you don't want to instant ult, and you might want to take that piece off for like a Gabe Horn, but not enough that I think it's really, really worth mentioning. Joker, this scenario is kind of similar to T-Sphere, honestly. You don't really need to get Full Scepter until you're at a point where you can comfortably like take it to like purple. So you can just get away with like a purple or higher Joker grenade. Nightwing I already went over, and Sinestro, I debated having IV Dart here, but I just think at the current point of this metagame, you can't, like Khan, you can run IV Dart on late game, but you can't really do that with Sin. So I just figured it was worth not mentioning that to trip people up. So yeah, that's going to be our highest value tier. Again, nothing's changed. I think I go over a little more. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I went over it pretty in depth in the last video. But yeah, I did end up moving Joker up just because I think he is just going to have more value overall. Starting things off, like I mentioned here, Constantine has been dropped a little bit. I think that biggest issue is pretty much as pointed out here, and that he, at this point, requires 2 other JLD units. You can't plug and play Constantine anymore. He's just not going to do enough. IV Dart is just better on this character, similar to T-Sphere, until you get IV Dart, until you get, Sigil until, like, purple or maybe even yellow. I would just run Sigil. Or, I would run IV Dart over Sigil. I don't think there's anything crazy about that. He's still good. He's still very good. I'm not saying Khan is bad by any means. I just think when it comes to like who has the most late game PvP just overall presence, Constantine has definitely slipped. For sure, he slipped. Hawkgirl and Superboy are still kind of in the same spot here. Superboy guitar, I kind of pointed out here, because his LP is so strong, at some point in your account, you're probably almost definitely going to, you should be investing in this piece to like blue 5 at the very least. So I don't think it's worth even, like, I would obviously throw Starheart Staff here, but it feels kind of stupid because, like, you really, I don't know, there's very few scenarios where you're going to be running this character without his guitar because his guitar is just so good for your whole account. So I didn't think it was worth mentioning. Hawkgirl here, I threw Gabehorn as an additional recommendation for if you're going against not Spirit. So 9 times out of 10 for what Hawkgirl's supposed to do, the Thanayurian Mace is going to be the best bet for sure. But there are some cases if you're not running into spiritual damage dealers, you can run either Gabehorn or Amazon Shield is also good. But I've seen more evidence towards Gabehorn personally, but it is worth mentioning that Amazon Shield does have success and it is also used in some cases. I added Mythic plus Flash here. I know so this, not to confuse people in the other servers, they have confirmed this won't be a bleed for everyone, but I just figured to appeal to as most people possible, I would include Flash and keep him ranked in comparison to the rest of the bleeds that everyone else has, just to help out those newer players. I think he's honestly on par with Superboy. I think I was overhyping him a tiny bit, because I didn't realize that his super attack or his ultimate scales off his base attack like Superboy's. So he's basically just going to be Superboy 2, but just for slightly different teams and doing slightly different things. Because obviously he might just straight up be better with the additional ult charge and the ult damage increase, but. Again, without seeing it, I don't want to. For now, I'm just saying he's on par with Superboy, but I think there's a universe where he turns out to be better. He's in a similar thing here where I just think that ult damage increase on that LP is just way too valuable to consider running Starheart and skipping out on that legacy piece. I think the legacy piece is definitely just way too nice that it's not worth doing anything else. Freeze in the same spot he was before. I mean, I think he's basically found his home here. And in the tier list, I would be shocked if he ever kind of moves from this. Like, he is insanely strong at just living, and you can kind of put him in a slot and just forget about him. You don't have to worry about keeping him up. You don't have to worry about a bunch of different like niche interactions. He's just gonna sit there and he's gonna take damage and he's gonna do it well. I think his LP is extremely important, but also you kind of want 5 blue or higher on it for it to be super worth. So, like, I put Amazon Shield here because this one is kind of, like, not really worth running until you get it up to 5 blue and higher. Maybe even arguably purple. But when you get there, this is just a character you can just throw into a bunch of comps. He can just sit in the front line and he can just survive and just be a nuisance. So definitely a good character. But, I mean, again, he's kind of like the cherry on top. Like, you should be investing in him after you've invested in your supports and your DPS and your more utility-based off-tanks, but definitely a very strong character. And I mentioned the 4-star skill here because that is the one that is going to reduce his single target damage taken, which definitely just helps him live a lot longer. So it's definitely worth. You can leave at the ult for the extra healing on the ult, or the 4-star for the extra damage reduction, either or. A bit of a shock here. Red Hood has kind of skyrocketed up. A bit more tech has come out with him in PvP. He's definitely a really strong 2 early game carry if you're in one of those like 400s. I think the only issue with using him as an early game carry in the 400s is that Nightwing will almost certainly have more overall value. But Red Hood is definitely a very, very strong champion, and like if you have extra resources and you can spend resources on his bleed without either screwing over your Nightwing resources or anyone else that's more important, I think it's not a bad pickup because he's a very strong, very consistent PvE character too. And on top of that, he's actually proving to have a lot of PvP value as well. There's some fun tech with like Aquaman that a friend of mine, Sway, discovered and kind of has been running rampant with in Global. And I think his legacy piece is honestly just not worth investing in. You would need to invest in it a lot, and I think your investment is better off just spent elsewhere. So you can run T-Spheres for if he is going to be like your main damage dealer, or if he's more of a supporting character, which you also can do. I think something I really like doing, I had a lot of fun with, is using him in Dawnbreaker to hit all the mobs really fast with the energy gain from Ivy Dart. Ivy Dart applies the damage increase debuff, and then it makes your Supergirl hit twice as hard. So like even if he's not the best character, like already he was competing with Supergirl for Dawnbreaker top scorer, but on top of that, you can also just turn him into a support for her. And even with his more quote-unquote supporting build with this legacy piece, he's still the second strongest character for Dawnbreaker by a considerable margin. So, very strong character, very good for many days of combat cycle, very, very solid in PvP, and definitely just a good character I think is definitely worth investing in if you have the ability to. And then down here, I ended up moving Lobo a little bit down. I don't want to say Lobo's bad. I think Lobo's still very strong. I just think he was the second best non-bleed physical DPS before Red Hood kind of found his niche, and then now that Red Hood's here, I think Lobo's definitely still good, but I think he is overall, slightly worse than Red Hood in terms of overall account value. Now I think Lobo is definitely the better PvP character, and he's the one who will compete. He will definitely do. He is and does do better at like the absolute pinnacle of PvP, like the whale meta over Red Hood, because just that anti healing is about like 1,000 times better than just HP. Damage based on HP that is 9 times out of 10 just going to hit a frontliner. So definitely Lobo is still a very strong character. I just still think my biggest concern with him is he's just an all or nothing character. You're going to have to invest a lot to get value out of him. And honestly, if you can only get him to like yellow 1 and then invest in him, he's kind of going to fall off and not stay relevant. So he's definitely good, but I mean, he's going to probably always round off the good tier just because I think you need to be ready to commit and to invest in this character. Definitely still strong, though. Alright, moving on to our new moderate value tier, you'll notice a few familiar faces here. Supergirl is going to kind of lead off this category. I think she is basically the poster child of this category, where you're investing in her because she's like 80% geared towards PvP, but specifically combat cycle. And then she's like okay in PvP, but that's like a very small percent of her value, and she is not going to compete at the highest level. She just physically cannot. Even if you give her the SWAT Hawkgirl Crypto Superboy combo, like she's still just going to get outclassed. But definitely a very strong champion, and I think a character who a lot of light spenders won't mind investing in because it's just she's consistently solid in a lot of the physical damage combat cycle bosses. And you can like kind of make her work in like an off team 3v3 if you're like in the light spender free to play borderish area. So definitely not bad, but I don't think not overall good enough long term to recommend higher. We have the new Mythic Plus Red Robin, a fantastic upgrade. I'm kind of just holding back because I'm 50-50 on how much that taunt is really gonna matter against the super meta units right now, but we'll keep an eye on him. I think he looks very strong. He works pretty well in Titans and Batfam. I think he's a little more geared towards Batfam because the general LP skill gives essentially any other frontliners, extra dodge. So I think he's definitely meant to be run with Batfam, but he also can 100% just work in Titans, which is very good because I'm sure as many of you know, Titans is in desperate need of a good frontline. So Red Robin is definitely a really good champion, and honestly, I think he's not a horrible pickup for a lot of these early game 4-4-6 plus players. Orphan is still basically in the same area. Her legacy piece, like you need her legacy piece. You just can't run anything else on her. She requires 3 Batfam, but I did want to point out that before the answer for 3 Batfam was always background Nightwing. Now I think there's a universe you can run both Night Fights with Night Fight Batman and Night Fight Red Hood, and then run Cass, and you have like a decent core. That's obviously still in like early phase testing, and I think her better quote unquote team is probably gonna be the Bop Batfam hybrid that she can enable with Hawkgirl and Batgirl. But I mean, I definitely think with the crit damage she'd get from Batman and just like the ability to just sit in the front, I think her in the Night Fights actually might make a really strong, legit like 3-man core. So keep an eye on her. I just because she's so dodge based, I would never expect her to go any higher than this tier, because that's just objectively 50% of the meta that you can't really do anything about in spiritual damage. But she is still insanely strong for dealing with physical, and really good at shutting down frontline physical tanks in a 1v1 like Death Metal Wonder Woman. So definitely good, but I don't think she's gonna have enough staying power overall to really be worth recommending any higher. Wally is a character here that we've kind of the more people get to play with him, the more he's kind of showing his merit. He is still the best character in the game for Drowning Killer Tank, there's no doubt. I mean, I've said this about 20 million times now. I have seen some semi, like something, in terms of results, at the Kraken level with Wally. That being said, I still think PvE for the most part is going to be, for the average player, his best bet. Until at least Beast Boy comes out. I think Beast Boy being a Guardian is literally best case scenario for Wally. And I think a legit team is going to be like Beast Boy, Martian Manticore, Wally, Starfire, and then you have like a flex slot probably for like a Cyborg or like a Superboy, somebody who can just give extra buffs. And I think Beast Boy might turn Wally into like a legit PvP unit for not super whales. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't think he's going to suddenly be top tier because I think his whole point being like his whole gimmick is it's gonna take him a while, but like once you stall for like a minute, he should have the buffs to basically just like one by one start like one tapping people. You need time to build up to it, and there's not enough pieces for the average player to build up to that in PvP yet. That being said, Beast Boy might obviously change that, but we're gonna have to wait and see. As for Legacy piece here, honestly, the same. This one's a little bit of a different scenario because I think you need his piece at like purple and higher. So T-Sphere is probably almost certainly going to be your better bet for most, your best bet for most people. His Legacy piece is like okay, but even at like high stars, it's honestly just not crazy. And like unless you just love Wally and you want to full send Wally, I don't see a reason to take this to purple stars. But you can do it, and it might work. So. And the last one rounding off this tier is the newest bleed unit for everyone, and we have Batman Night Fight. It's kind of a weird character. I've seen a lot of questionable, just like questions about this character because, I mean, there was an infamous video going around about the day or two after he dropped in Global where it was like, oh, you can't kill a solo Bane, but it was like a solo Bane with like, you know, a rocket, a set bonus, everything was maxed. And, like, most warriors wouldn't have been able to kill that. Like, Swamp Thing and Hawkgirl, the two best warriors other than Death Metal, other than Iconics and this Batman here, like, they would not even come close to killing that Bane. So, I don't know. The thing with this character is I think a lot of people, and myself included, were expecting him at, like, purple or higher LP to be able to hyper carry, and he just can't. He's pretty much textbook cleave unit where he's just gonna... Hey, he's just swinging his big sword, and he's chunking away at the front line, but he's not actually doing, like, a ton of work that you can directly see. So, he's kind of a weird champion because he feels like he's not doing enough, but, like, honestly, even just, like, at, like, purple 5 and you get his legacy piece, like, the 9 seconds that he's just sitting there and just, like, you can't get rid of him, that's usually enough time for, like, a Nightwing or a Red Hood to, like... just one-shot somebody or just, like, start chaining up kills. So he's not crazy, and I definitely don't think he's worth looking at all if you don't have Batfam. I mean, if you're a whale and you want to just use him because I think there's a legit argument for a character that can just be invulnerable, basically, for can't die for 9 seconds and is just a meat bag, meat shield. But for the average player, for somebody who is not whaling and not spending a ton, I think only if you have Batfam, and only if your purpose of Batfam is with Red Hood Night Fight. I think if you don't have Red Hood Night Fight, this character becomes a lot less valuable. But I don't know. We'll kind of keep an eye on that. I feel pretty safe about him where he's ranked in the tier list and where he's ranked here. I think he's just like okay. I think a lot of people are gonna overly hate on him because he's not doing the big damage we kind of thought he could, but his utility is definitely there. Could it be more? 100%. But that's why you have characters. That's why you have characters up here. Like you have your Swamp Things, you have your Hippos, you have your Hawk Girls. So he's fine here. He's nothing crazy, but he's also not horrible. And there's definitely worse characters in the game for sure. Oh, and I mentioned the 4th star here as a breakpoint because that's the skill that gives additional crit damage to Batfam, and that's basically all that matters because. You don't care about him doing damage, so you don't care about any of the other skills. That's pretty much it. Alright, starting off with our luxury bleeds here. I went ahead and moved Martian Manhunter down. Now that knowing Beast Boy's an outsider, there is a universe. He's going to immediately move back up to at least moderate value, but I just feel like right now he's just way too niche. He's like a Constantine and like kind of a Riddler counter, but he just gets deleted in a lot of things, and you basically, like... It feels like in a lot of cases, any character that you have... that's not a good example, but he's one of those characters that you have to build your team comp knowing he's on it and knowing what he needs, and he's not able to... even when he gets everything he needs and everything he wants, he's not able to perform consistently compared to the rest of the roster. So he's definitely still a good character. He's still a solid character. Like, I don't think this affects his tier list ranking. I just mean, like, in terms of the average player getting value out of this unit, it's just really not there. And it's like only if you have extra resources and you want to use him for like a really obnoxious like 3rd team or like a Titans Outsiders team maybe down the road. But I just feel like right now he's luxury, and because his LP is basically is required and is a really like you want to take this to absolute minimum blue 5, if not like as high as you can to make this guy work. I just can't recommend, unfortunately, unless you have extra resources to spare. Deathstroke here is kind of in a similar spot. His entire purpose is just off-meta and multi-team meta pure LOD stuff, because pure LOD is definitely 100% still a threat for ship modes and for 3v3, but meta brawl, it's basically irrelevant. CC, he's like okay. CC, it's like you're not getting this unit for a CC value. The CC value is just like okay enough that it's a nice bonus. PvE, there's just better assassins. There's just better damage dealers. He's just not the best. And his second star is the breakpoint, because obviously he is going to do the first skill right when he starts the fight, and then he's going to ult right after, so you want as much damage on that first skill as possible to maximize his damage output. So definitely a good character. Definitely like an okay. He's not terrible, but he's just, he's been power corrupted. There's better, cheaper options to run that will essentially do the same thing he is going to do. But if you do want to run pure LOD and you do have a bit of a LOD already built, you can definitely get away with investing in him for like a off team. I don't recommend his katanas. I mean, I'm sure that's been said ad nauseum, but they're just not great. Like maybe for PvE, but even then you don't need them for PvE. It just makes PvE easier. But still doable without them. Now, a bit of a shock here. I am going to go ahead and move Scarecrow up, kind of for a similar reason that I have Deathstroke here, in that it's just, there is a legit reason to use Scarecrow. I know his, obviously most people know now, this guy got like a generational nerf. He went from easily the best tank in the game, and the kind of motor behind the real cancer of LOD comp and its peak. But, like, at this point now, I mentioned it here, I don't think it's worth picking him up on your first go-around, on his first, banner or two, but I think, like, by his second rerun, if you have everything else you need and you want to focus on LOD and AMW, you're going to need this guy at some point. So it's worth mentioning, building him, but, again, I still think he fits best in that, like, in this, like, luxury bleed, quote-unquote, of, like, if you have extra resources, I don't think he's a terrible pickup. And then rounding off this tier is Raish. Kind of similar to Deathstroke, but he's just a little bit worse. There's not a ton to talk about, because obviously a lot of people don't have this character. And I don't even think we're certain if he's going to return as a bleed. So it's not worth mentioning. And obviously the legacy piece is like whatever, because this only applies to like 6 people. But he's just in the same boat as all assassins, where you're just going to run it. You'd rather run a high star T-sphere over a low star unique LP. So yeah, I think that's gonna be the end for luxury, and we're gonna move on to our last category here, and we have all the skips. Starting with Superman, his ceiling has definitely increased, and I think he makes sense being the top of the skip category, because if for whatever reason you can and want to invest in the solar suit all the way to purple stars, if you have SWAT and you have SWAT's LP invested in. If you have Hawk Girl, if you can give him an unyielding set and yielding will set bonus, and then especially when we get Mythic plus Green Lantern, I think, or Mythic plus Flash, there's something he can do, but it's like the average player, the amount of resources that it would take to get him to that point, like, like, what are you doing? Obviously, if you love Superman, you can do it, but, for the average player, this guy is just really not worth the obscene amount of resources it takes for him to just be, like, good. So, unfortunately, Superman isn't going to be able to break out a skip tier even with all this extra stuff, but I think it is worth mentioning that, like, out of all the skips, I think he's definitely the best. And it's kind of not close. Almost definitely it's not close. So yeah. I should say, by best, I mean he has the highest potential ceiling, and that he can do the most potentially. But yeah, just for now, he's not, his base legacy piece is too weak, his base kit is too weak, just without all this extra supporting. And his supporting is expensive because it's a paywalled event character with a high star legacy piece. It's a legacy piece that you can only even unlock for the first time once you get the other legacy piece to purple stars, and then you really, really, really need this unyielding will set bonus on him. So, just a lot of pieces, just not worth it for the average player. And unfortunately for a lot of the Amazon believers, Artemis is taking a big hit. I feel bad because I think Amazon's as a team is just really cool conceptually. But there is just nowhere to use this character right now. She just doesn't do anything. You want strong single target physical damage, just invest in any assassin. You want a tank, she doesn't do that, because she takes increased damage by Sinestro. Like, Sinestro is just gonna one-shot this dude no matter. You could have Artemis 5 red like speed, she's still probably getting one-shotted by like 2 red scarecrows in her ult. or 2 red Sinestros in her ult. Like, she is just not good. I've been talking to people who, like, I know a couple people who have, like, every character 5 red, and they're like, yeah, I've, like, never even looked at Artemis. I definitely think she has a place, and I definitely think she can be good. You know, basically any character in this game, in this tier, and on this list, if you really, really just balls to the wall, full invest in them, you can do something with them. 100%. I'm not saying they're completely useless if they're down here. I'm just saying for the average player, like you're gonna really struggle to find Artemis like bringing anything of value to her account, because she wants to be run with Amazons to get a lot of her buffs built up. But like, let's look at the Amazon roster. You have a paywalled iconic champion who is honestly, Death Metal Wonder Woman is honestly pretty mid. She's not even that good right now. You have one of the best supports slash tanks in the game in Hippo, so like that's something. You have Donna, who is literally horrible, and part of the reason they stopped making new mythics because she was so useless on release. And then you have Mythic Wonder Woman, who's like okay, but like you don't really want to run her over like a freeze or a swamp or a hippo or a fucking or a hawk girl. Like, I don't know. So Amazon's just in a weird spot right now. I think they kind of were just like, yeah, let's get something out to ride the hype of Death Metal Wonder Woman, and then they've kind of just been like drowning ever since, because they made their main non paywalled hyper carry unit take increased damage by the strongest damage type in the game. So, like, I don't know what you were thinking. Unfortunately, this character just kind of has no place right now for the average player. And it really sucks. I think Artemis is a really cool character, and I really like her, like, model, and a lot of the Amazons just look awesome. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that the Amazons kind of get a chance to shine. But I just, unfortunately, right now, man, there's really just no reason to build them, unfortunately. Talia's still down here. The amount of she's in the same tier of Superman, where it's like you can do things with her, but like, oh my god, the amount of like propping up and investment that she needs. Like, Arca is one of the honestly, at this point, he might be the only person in the game with a 5 red Talia, as far as I know, or like one of like 3. It took this dude until Red Star LP to be like, wait, she like does stuff, and it's like, okay, dude, who cares about my Red Star assassin with a Red Star legacy piece like countering Deathstroke? Like, if you want an AoE damage dealer, there's like 40 other options. If you want an assassin, there's 40 other options. If you want a physical damage dealer, there's 200 other options. Like, I don't know. Unfortunately, she's just not in the best spot right now. And I just don't think if she ever comes back as a bleed in her current state, just not worth spending anvils on by any means. And then rounding off the skips here, far and away the worst bleed. I don't know why they thought making one of the worst standard mythics just a mythic plus, because like would save him. Like, he sucked because his kit was terrible, and they didn't change his kit, so he's still terrible. And then they gave him a really I went on a long ass rant. If you want, I think it was like a 5-minute rant. I don't need to go on again. This character just fails at everything he tries to do. He can't tank, he can't deal damage, he can't support his team. I don't even, like, I think it's just a waste of eyes to get his legacy piece. I didn't even put it on here not because it's bad, or not because he doesn't need it, it's just because he's so bad. Why, if you've already wasted anvil on him, don't waste eyes on his legacy piece too. Just take the L and just go spend those eyes somewhere else. So, that's going to do it for me. I don't want to spend too long, but I think this is a good amount of time. Just kind of wanted to go over here and give a bit more of a verbal explanation for some of these tiers, since I think, there is obviously a lot that can't be I can't say through an infographic. I kind of like to verbally speak it out, and this just helps I think kind of give people an idea on my thought process. But yeah, so of course, this is extremely subjective. It's based largely on Global 1 Meta Brawl combat cycle data. I do definitely look at Cluster 2 a lot. I've started looking at Cluster 3 a little bit, but for the most part, just from my personal experience being in beta and playing with and just knowing a lot of the global players for a long time, most of my data is based off of that 200 to like, what's it now, like 238-ish range of people. Just because I think also that has the most spenders, so you can kind of see like the pinnacle of players. So yeah, that's gonna do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope this was a little more informative and hopefully answered any questions you had about this graphic. If you have any more, of course, feel free. I'll do my best to answer. You can leave a comment on the YouTube video. I also posted this on the subreddit. You can leave a comment over there. You can check out the Just Like a Discord, and I can answer questions there. So yeah, you can reach me in a couple different places. You can also just DM me on Discord. You can find me in the main server. My name is just Tavaka. I don't really care. If you have questions, feel free to hit me up. I'll do my best to answer them. I am in the process of getting ready to move back to college, so I might be kind of slow, but I will do my best to answer. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Later.